Welcome back to another session of Solar Academy and Suncast Media's Untangling the Grid, which is a fact, or it's a problem for all of us that are in this DER decarbonization world, understanding the grid environment here in the United States and how we can lower the cost and increase the speed of deploying the things we want to see. Today is an absolutely incredible session following on the good work of Ted Thomas that we did in sessions 101 and 201 around education of this very unique environment of our transmission and distribution network for electricity in the United States. Today, we are joined by former chairman of FERC, John Wellinghoff, and also former chairman of FERC, Neil Chatterjee. Ted Thomas is also joining us. Unfortunately, Neil is en route somewhere, and Ted is also en route somewhere, especially during these July holiday weekends. And so they're not able to join by video, but we will hear them throughout the conversation, and I'll be sure if it's not clear to indicate who is speaking. So let me get right into it and introduce Chairman John Wellinghoff, who is a friend, and last time we saw each other was over coffee in the East Bay, which was a real joy. And I'm very proud to say that John is a California-born man, attorney, spent a lot of his life in Nevada, where he's been working on this energy transition issue for increased renewables, energy efficiency, electrification of mobility. John himself was the principal author behind the renewable portfolio standards for the great state of Nevada. A very proud moment, I'm sure. First wins, early wins are great ones. John is a longtime advocate of energy customers, and I think we all dare not call them ratepayers, although the certain parties do like to call them that. We like to think about end users that can participate in the energy markets fairly, equally, and safely, and demand response. And of course, load flexibility plays a role in that. John, under President George W. Bush, served as a federal regulatory commissioner starting in 2006 and into the Obama term as the FERC chair until 2013. FERC Chair Wellinghoff led on programs and market instruments to support decarbonization of the electrical and mobility systems for all Americans, including the cashback cars concept, which is something we may talk about today or we may not talk about today, but it's a very interesting concept that was a sort of an early bird of how V2G might work out and how we value that rolling energy storage. After his work at FERC, Wellinghoff led Solar City and eventually Tesla, but only for a moment, energy policy work. And today, John serves along with a good friend of mine, Greg, as the Chief Policy Officer of Voltus, a leading demand flexibility aggregator and market maker. So that's the introduction for Mr. John Wellinghoff, and thank you very much, Chairman Wellinghoff, for joining us here today. Also, not on video, but on audio, we have Chairman Neil Chatterjee. Directly after receiving his JD from the University of Cincinnati in Ohio, Chairman Chatterjee served as policy advisor to the U.S. Representative Deborah Price from Ohio, then a policy advisor for, and this is a really awesome one, National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, NRECA, representing 42 million American energy users across 47 states being served by not-for-profit cooperative energy providers. Super awesome work. Neil then served Senator Mitch McConnell from Kentucky as a policy advisor for 7 years. And in 2017, Chairman Chatterjee was elected to FERC and served under President Trump, I think uniquely twice, stepping back to be a commissioner for a minute and then back to being the chairman to complete his term. He is now a senior policy advisor at Hogan Lovells, a leading law firm and thought leader in the energy space. So thank you, Chairman Chatterjee, for joining us today. And finally, but definitely not the least, we have Ted Thomas, who was the chairman of the Arkansas Public Service Commission from 2013 to 2022. Ted is a longtime advocate of open access for the electrical network and a strong proponent of solar electricity, and as it has become the lowest cost electron. And it will serve all people, and that's important. I think something we all share. Born and raised in Arkansas, Ted led session 201 and 101, previous sessions of this Untangling the Grid episode, and you'll see that in the show notes. So as a housekeeping method, we will have the presentation materials that we're going to show today in the show notes, and we'll also have any other support materials in the show notes as we get along here. So I just want to make sure everyone can see this, because we're going to use this as a speaking mechanism for prompting ourselves. This does feel a little bit like a school environment, and that's sort of some of the point of it. And this is, again, a production of Solar Academy and Suncast Media, focusing on untangling the grid. This is session 301, and we are going to be working on answering the question of why is it so expensive and time consuming to interconnect the things that we want to see: solar electricity generation, wind electricity generation, energy storage assets, EV charging infrastructure, valuing demand side flexibility, etc. And today is a special episode with Chairman Wellinghoff and Chairman Chatterjee discussing potential solutions. And there's six components here. Some are reaches, some are immediately possible. And I am going to hand off to Chairman Wellinghoff to lead from this point forward. So thank you, Chairman Wellinghoff.
Thank you, John, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. Appreciate it very much. It's an issue of why is it so expensive and time consuming to interconnect these things, and then why is it, so difficult to ensure that we can't, accelerate their deployment as well, not only with interconnection, but with utilization by consumers. And there are, a number of solutions that I think I threw out there for everybody to consider. And, and the first category, I think, of those solutions, if I remember correctly, is that one thing I came to believe in firmly at FERC was that we need to incorporate competition into the system in a much more robust way than we have now. And here I'm indicating both at the retail, wholesale, and potentially even at the transmission level. And that's one thing we tried to do, speaking about transmission first, since our question does initially discuss interconnection. That's one thing we tried to do in Order 1000 when I was at FERC, myself and my fellow colleagues, and one of my Republican colleagues at FERC, Commissioner Mark Spitzer, was a huge proponent of incorporating competition into Order 1000, and huge proponent of eliminating what was called the right of first refusal, where traditionally incumbent utilities within the states, especially those states with vertically integrated utilities that were monopoly providers of services, insisted upon having the right to first determine whether or not they could build a transmission project without any competition coming in to bid on that project to determine if it could be done faster, quicker, at a lower cost. And we removed that right from federal law in Order 1000. And unfortunately, the utilities are clawing it back. In fact, I was talking to some people in Kansas this morning where they're trying to put in a ROFR law there, right of first refusal law there, that would contravene the provisions of FERC Order 1000, of course, and that's being challenged now in the federal courts. They challenged a similar law in Texas. So, not going on too far here to let my colleague Neil step into this, but I believe that we should put as much competition into the development of transmission as possible. Certainly with wholesale markets, and we'll talk about that a little later. Wholesale markets should be competitive, and there should be wholesale competitive markets as broadly as possible. And then even at the retail side, and something I tried to do in Nevada that was unsuccessful, And this is something that hasn't gained a lot of traction yet, but I think it needs to, and that is having consumers have more retail access, like they do in Texas, for example, and a number of other states. We need to have consumers have those competitive options. And with that, John, I'll stop and I'll turn it over to Neil and let him provide some comments on this issue.